All right, so welcome back. And so our next session, welcome back to Water Stories panel discussions. And our next session is with scholars of religion anthropology and Atupala, discussing rivers, religion, and climate change. And again, for those of you joining us just now, audience members are welcome to submit questions at any time throughout the program, and our speakers will get to as many as they can. And whether you are here in person with us or online, you can submit questions using the Slido link that is provided on the screen behind me or chat feature of the Zoom webinar. So let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker, John Stratton Hawley, or Jack Hawley, is Clerical Professor of Religion at Barnard College, Columbia University. And he has taught at Barnard and Columbia since 1986, and he is a specialist of Hinduism and South Asian religions, especially on Krishna, anything Krishna, I think, right? That you ask Jack, Hindu god Krishna. Our second speaker, Tulasi Srinivas, is Professor of Anthropology, Religion, and Transnational Studies at the Marlborough Institute for Interdisciplinary Studies at Emerson College. And she also, prior to joining Emerson, she taught at Wheaton College and at the Berkeley Center for Religion and Peace at Georgetown University. Tulasi Srinivas is a recognized scholar of religion and ecology with a focus on climate justice. And she was a Radcliffe Fellow in 2017. So welcome back, Tulasi. And our speakers will be joined by Atul Bhalla. Again, briefly, Bhalla is a conceptual artist working on environmental urgencies and a professor and head of Department Media and Performance, Art, Media, and Performance at Shiv Nadar University, Delhi, India. And Bhalla is also the Mittal Institute Distinguished Climate Artist in Residence this semester. So it's now my pleasure to invite Professor Jack Hawley to the podium to share his presentation. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Jenna, and for this wonderful invitation. It's great to be here. And since we were talking about the local and the universal, or as they said, global, let me say that it's a wonderful privilege to be at Radcliffe and to see this track around us. My wife was in the class of 1968 when Radcliffe was Radcliffe, not Radcliffe, Harvard. There's some family history with that. So that's number one, local. Number two, local, is that I got to come up from New York yesterday, which gave me, Aliyah, I'm thinking of you. It gave me a view of the marshes along the beautiful, beautiful Sound. You know, and knowing that I was coming to this conference and looking out the window just makes you realize what a privilege it is to be surrounded by such water and how devastating it is to think that we might not be. And third, let me say, since we're at Harvard, that I've had the memory of swimming in the Ganges with Diana Eck, of all people, years and years ago, just before it entered Banaras, a lifetime of memory. So let me now begin. I see that I'm not on the right page, just like life. Here we go. Look at this wonderful image of a woman drenching herself with the waters of the Yamuna River as it passes through Delhi. Cambridge has the Charles, New York has the Hudson, Delhi has the Yamuna. Or this one, now more upbeat than meditative. It's not, however, a bubble bath. What makes the river foam white, is its chemical content. This river, sacred to Krishna, is in the top 10 list always of the most polluted rivers in the world and often ranks number one. Last March, I was in Delhi, on the Delhi Metro, crossing back into the main city from Noida on the other side of the Yamuna. You would not want to drink this water. It wasn't always so. There's a major place of pilgrimage 100 miles downstream from Delhi called Vrindavan. It's where Krishna is believed to have spent his early years, right up through adolescence. When I lived there 50 years ago, a pilgrim's first impulse, very often, was to go to the river. She would bathe, she'd drink a little bit of the holy Yamuna, and then, only then perhaps, would she circumambulate the sacred town and visit its temples. But now, this is Keshi Ghat, where Vrindavan juts out into the river, a great place to bathe, or at least it used to be. Someone's just done so, and someone else kneels down to take the water in his hand, thence to drink. Nowadays, this is very rare. Only a half century ago, it was virtually prescribed. One of the names of the Yamuna is Kalindi. It's a patronymic. She takes this name from Kalin, meaning sun, but it also denotes a specific mountain in the Himalayas where she comes from. It's a wonderful thing to go there. Oh, your bus may get caught in the mud once or twice on the way, but look at the glorious amaranth that fills the narrow valley where the Virgin Yamuna flows, and she flows fast and loud. Finally, you arrive in Yamunotri, one of the 4 major tirthasthans, pilgrimage places, in the Himalayas. And there's a hot spring, so you can actually bathe. You mix the boiling water that spurts from the mountain with the icy glacial flow that rushes down from higher up, from Kalinda Mountain. You're far above the industrial and man-made pollution down below. Yamunotri is at about 11,000 feet. Almost all pilgrims conclude their journeys at this point. But if you set out on an overnight trek and climb up to 14,500 feet, you are greeted with this scene. It's like being on the moon. This is Saptarishikund, several little ponds and a lake just beyond, named after the 7 sages who are understood to have been directly born of Brahman, the first mediators of tangible divinity. Water is their medium. I can scarcely believe that I was once there in person. Vrindavan is far below, on the plains, but only 20 years ago, its Yamuna too had a magic. The great photographer Robin Beach, who left London's world of fashion photography to live in Vrindavan, caught this early morning image, and I wonder if you can see a heron hiding in the shadows. All this beauty. And yet, day by day, it crumbles. 3 successive regimes in the state of Uttar Pradesh, where Vrindavan is located, have dedicated themselves to making the Yamuna a citizen not of her world, but of ours. The government headed by Akhilesh Yadav saw an election ahead and tried to appeal to Hindus who wanted to see something done for Vrindavan. Without ever making their exact plan public, just like the BJP government that followed them, they hired a private contractor to sink 17-foot girders into the side of the Yamuna to beautify her by confining her to a stable, deeper channel, a non-flowing channel, I might say. A ring road and a promenade would run alongside. As elections approached, a video of all this was circulated via cell phones. It was made in, guess where? New York. And when the BJP took over, you see I mispronounce it, when the BJP took over, they were the ones who won the 2017 elections, they built a platform out into the river, thus separating Keshi Ghat definitively from the water that used to give it its raison d'etre as a ghat. And what about the Kala Pani? The black water, the sewage that flows into the Yamuna, both from upriver and from numerous drains in Vrindavan itself. Well, at least we could deal with the former, the stuff coming from down from the direction of Delhi. In 2016 and 17, these huge pipes were sunk along the side of the river so as to confine the polluted water into a massive drain that started upstream from the town. And what would happen to that water? It would pass by Keshi Ghat and go back into the Yamuna on the other side of town. And what about the offerings to the river that were traditionally made at Keshi Ghat? These pujas would continue, they could continue. Here's a group doing so from Gujarat. But they would have to lift their offerings over the pipes to get them afloat in the river. And there wasn't really any river within range. The girders made that impossible. What did the Yamuna think of all these efforts on her behalf? Here's the verdict she rendered in the monsoon of 2018. Maybe the most beautiful image I can show you, the highest art, is this one. It's water being treated at Vrindavan's one functional sewage treatment plant. Hardly enough for the town as a whole, but at least it's something. In 2019, the National Minister for River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation, Nitin Gadkari, promised an elaborate expansion of sewage treatment plants for the whole Mathura region, of which Vrindavan is a part. He authorized 500 crores of rupees for that job, some $7 million, which is a lot in India. So far as I know, none of it has ever been built in Vrindavan. How do we meet the water challenge in Vrindavan? One way is to give up on the water bank altogether, the erstwhile reason for Vrindavan's very existence, and go live in some virtual Vrindavan quite far away. Does this sound American to you, suburban? The top of the line, really, is the real estate development that surrounds the Vrindavan Chandrodaya Mandir, which is being built on the outskirts of town by ISKCON of Bangalore. It'll be 70 stories high, making it the world's tallest religious building. Hope this satisfies your idea of what a religion ought to be. Your water will come from tube wells sunk deep into the earth, sunk deeper and deeper, as a matter of fact, since the underground water table goes down all the time. For one thing, those 17-foot girders are preventing the river from replenishing this underground supply on a yearly basis. But we have to fight back. Even if 95% of the people living in Vrindavan want more vikas, more development, then what resources do we have? Not just legal ones, but conceptual ones, spiritual ones, maybe even artistic. Many say that they place their trust in Krishna, the environmentalist. Indeed, there is a wonderful and celebrated story of his confronting the demon snake Galia, the black one, whose heat meant that cattle and people couldn't drink from the Yamuna anymore. Birds flying overhead were so singed by the hot river that they dropped dead into it. But how to take this? How to take this myth? As art, it's stirring. But does it mean that Kaliya Mardan Karne Wale Krishna will somehow take care of our problems? Or does it mean that to be his servants, we have to join in his cause? Then there is the monasticum of the 16th century theologian Vallabhacharya. It's a paean to the Yamuna in 8 Sanskrit verses. Note how Vallabha weaves in the beautiful fact that the Yamuna descends to our plains from above. He sees the arms of this goddess in the river's waves, following a convention that had long been familiar in Sanskrit literature. And don't think that this is just parochial. No less than Lata Mangeshkar, India's most famous film singer, has given us a version of the Yamunashtakam. Oh, I was just going to go ahead Please forgive me, Lataji. I'm going to skip ahead without saying anything about the BJP government and its biggest plans, but rather end in the 16th century, where we have just been, thanks to Lata, in the hands of Vallabhacharya and in Sanskrit. Let me pipe, however, into the vernacular by going to the Brajbhasha poet Surdas. Brajbhasha is a form of Hindi. Legend says that Surdas was blind, and perhaps he did go blind at the end of his life. But I like to think of him coming to the Yamuna many times in the course of that life. Here is how he addresses her. He names her by her mountain patronymic, Kalindi or Kalyandri, as he says here. He notices that she shares the gently dark coloration of Krishna himself. And then what? He simply... I'm sorry. I thought that I would have the Sanskrit right. Oh, sorry. I can see it. The Brajbhasha in front of me. Now I know where to look for it. Let me read you what Sur says. Kalyandri. Can you see that? Yes. Kalyandri, kaso ki pyari, jaise hum par syama karat hai, aisi kripa karhu tumanyari. Jamuna jasaki rasi chahon jog jam jethi jagaki mehtari. Sura, there's the poet's name, Sura buroka bahu janimano, kaha karun, yeh prakriti hamari. Kaha kahun, yeh prakriti hamari. The word he uses at the end, you've just heard it, is prakriti, and it has two dimensions, not just nature, just as nature does in English. On the one hand, it's our nature, and on the other hand, it's nature's nature, with a capital N. How are these connected? Back in 2021, when COVID stopped all the factories, you could actually meet a Yamuna like this at Vrindavan. You could still see her, and you could even bathe in her. But no more, my friends.
I invite Tulasi to join the podium. And welcome Tulasi to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you to the Radcliffe Institute for hosting me yet again. And thank you to Becky for organizing this and Gina for her kind invitation. Thanks also to Jack. Every time we're on a panel, I always learn from him. And to Atul for his wonderful and inspiring, humbling artwork, actually. Today I'm going to share a meditation on a part of a book I'm writing. It's unraveling as we speak. The book is titled The Absent Goddess, Water, Women, and Religion in a Time of Climate Apocalypse. It features my hometown of Bangalore, India. Bangalore used to be known in antiquity as Kalyana Nagara, or the town of auspiciousness, for its roughly 1,000 lakes and water bodies. These lakes most of which are sacred in Hindu folklore, local Hindu folklore, have temples dedicated to goddesses at their very edge. Many of these goddesses are disease-preventing goddesses, goddesses of contagion, goddesses of smallpox, such as in this older stone temple and the newer striped temple at the shore of this lake. But today, these lakes are so polluted by industrial effluents, rather like the Yamuna, that they are covered with a sudsy, corrosive fluid that froths on occasion. And it is so corrosive that it burns the skin of anyone who walks into it. And occasionally, it even bursts into toxic flames. The dirty waters of Bangalore are so infamous that efforts to clean them up recently made the headlines of the New York Times. My interlocutors in Bangalore tell me this is Kali Yuga, the age of evil that ends in the apocalypse of drowning known as pralaya in Hinduism. Indeed, in Hinduism, water is everywhere, drinkable and not. In its divine and earthly form, it is known as up collectively in Sanskrit. Water is sacred for Hindus, primordial, it is divine. It's seen in the power of the ocean and in the cloud, the thunderstorm. God Indra is believed to have the capacity to purify the world at large. In the Rig Veda, the oldest scripture of Hinduism, water is seen as extant before time itself. For the origin of the universe, the great god Vishnu, of whom Krishna is an avatar, floats upon the cosmological waters. And at the end of time, Shiva induces the great flood, the pralaya, to end the world. The Ganga, or rather the Yamuna, which merges with it, as Jack and Vallabha would undoubtedly say, is India's premier river, a sacred mother goddess, believed to descend from the heavens to afford salvation, her path defined by the footsteps of a great white sage king. This forms an ancient Indic riparian theology, one might say. Yet, as Jack's work shows, the river is polluted beyond belief. An apocalyptic end for a great river, a day zero. Yet the term apocalypse, in its original meaning, is not an end as we use it, but rather an unveiling. So I ask, what is unveiled in our era of climate crisis? Bangaloreans, like many in America, are lost. They're lost in a well of anticipatory, anthropogenic, cosmological grief. For as many of you know, India is among the top water-stressed countries of the world. Every day, 600 million people in India drink unsafe water. Day zero, when taps will run dry, is foretold for 2025. And worrying performances, such as Day Zero, are enacted in Bangalore about water scarcity, impending and real. So my central question for my book is, it's simple, if existential. If water is life, what is a life without water? Today, I turn my gaze to a lost river. When I was a child in Bangalore, we used to visit my father's family in the neighboring town of Mysore. The highway crossed a large drain, which was known locally as Kengeri Mori, Mori meaning drain. It ran on the outskirts of Bangalore, and we used to hold our noses at the stench as we crossed and laugh. But occasionally, actually just once, but other pilgrims stopped frequently at a 600-year-old temple, so it's believed to be, to Hanuman, the son of the wind god Vayu, that sat on the edge of this drain. Even as a child, I knew that this was an odd place for a temple. Why would one place a temple at the edge of a stinking drain? I would gaze into the gray, thick, bubbling stream below, filled with rubbish, and I remember the sense of overwhelming foreboding and dread that I felt at the sight. Then, some 25 years later, as an anthropologist, I did field work in the north of the city, over 10 miles away from the Kengeri Mori. But something uncanny happened. One afternoon, the normal sound of laughing children playing in a cricket field was broken. It was torn apart by screaming. The earth had opened and swallowed a playing child. A man from the neighborhood was lowered down onto a rope with a big lantern. He found himself in a cavern 50 feet below, in a beautiful preserved temple dedicated to Nandi, or the bull vehicle of the great god Shiva. But the temple itself lacked a central shrine. Rather, the center was a void, a deep, dark, mysterious pool where ancient turtles swam. A stream fell from the mouth of Nandi onto the water below. I was intrigued. I turned to the city archives and to older historians for an answer. They told of a river, the Vrishabhavati, literally translated as one that flows from a bull's hoof. Looking at ancient maps and talking to city geographers, I realized that this Hanuman temple, you can see it right at the top, sat not at the drain, but at a sacred sangam, the confluence of two rivers, the bull's hoof and the larger Arkavati. You can see the connection. This sangam, or an ancient fording point, a meeting of two rivers, became an ancient fording point, a tirtha, where one might, as Hindus like myself believe, ford from one world to another, carried by the current to the soul's final destination. This is a powerful fold in space-time. I was stunned that I had been crossing and recrossing this tirtha my entire life, oblivious, only knowing it as a stinking drain. Through the colonial archives, I found that in the 18th and 19th century, as the British built Bangalore into a military center, they connected medieval stormwater drains into the river, and later underground sewerage as well. And in the 20th century, as Bangalore became a manufacturing hub, industries released their toxic runoff into the Bull's Hoof too. So the Bull's Hoof River died, and with it, the local ecology, the birds, the trees, the lotuses, and the fish. Today, ecological groups who have done scientific studies of this river report that solid particulate matter and chemical matter make it a public health hazard unlike any other in India. Yet the Bull's Hoof still flows into the Arkavati, and the mighty Arkavati into the mighty Kaveri at the yellow point. And the Kaveri waters the agricultural region of the whole southern part of the Indian subcontinent. And in a deathly turn, the waters of the Kaveri are tapped further downstream and recycled into Bangalore's water supply. Despite citizens' protests then, the bull's hoof is ignored, leaving Bangalore teetering between drought and toxic flood. Meanwhile, however, the priest of the Hanuman temple, a young man named Sri Kumar, recounts that his grandfather used the waters of the bull's hoof to ritually bathe the deity. Until the 1970s, he says, the Bull's Hoof River would regularly flood. Its waves filled the temple and lapped at the feet of the deity, he told me. Today, we are frightened, he says, when the river threatens to breach because the water is so toxic, it started to melt the stone feet of the deity and leaves behind a foul-smelling sludge. Nowadays, Sri Kumar says, we prefer to use bottled water for the deity's ritual bath. It is clear then, to me, that we need a new riverine riparian theology that speaks to such a climate apocalypse. But where do we find hope? One evening, I walked along a medieval anacut that comes from the Tamil word annakattu, which means a mud check dam, near the Arkavati River. And there I met Kempama, an elderly woman who was repairing the mud dam using ancient techniques, indigenous techniques that were handed down generation to generation from, she claimed, Chola times, and Chola would be roughly the 10th or 11th century. Kempama is from a Dalit caste of well diggers and water diviners. These outcasted Dalit bodies like hers were, and in some cases still are, believed to be polluting. So though her ancestors found water and dug wells that recharged the Bangalorean aquifer under our feet, they were forbidden from drinking this water that they found for fear that they would pollute it all. She says she cares for these waters, Nodkolthini, she says in Kannada, as though they are my children, a strange yet natural kinship based on ancient mythic understandings of human and natural life. Hopefully, with God's grace, his anugraha, she says, the river goddess will return. She calls for clearer waters. Her hopefulness, her care, are evidence of such divine grace, such anugraha. Part of the problem of the climate crisis is that we lack such grace. A techno-scientific utopia of carbon-neutral negotiations, while enormously useful in the West, has limited applicability in Kempama's world, if at all. It is, after all, still rooted in a Western philosophy of obsolescence and discard. I had asked earlier what such an apocalypse unveils. Perhaps it is this gift of grace, combined with the ancient craft of repair that Kempama offers us. It is, after all, repair and reparations fueled by grace that affords us hope in this era. An inclusive, embedded, sophisticated, but most of all, indigenous solution to thirst is perhaps the new hopeful riparian theology that we need. And it is grace that I find when I hear Kempama singing to the river Kaveri at dusk. O Mother Goddess Kaveri, she sings, come to us, I beseech you. You are our life, our world, our sustenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack and Tulasi, for such moving stories and framing. So I guess in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to have a discussion amongst the panelists led by Atul. And in the audience, in person or on Zoom, if you have any questions, you can always submit them on a Slido, and we will get to them towards the end of the session. So, Atul, do you want to sort of start commenting?
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jack, and thank you, Tulasi, for your talks. Wonderful evocations of different locations in India. And first thing is I have to apologize to both of you because I'm a visual artist first, even though I work in a university, and both of you are academics. So there might be questions which I may come from a non-academic background. Right? So apologies. First thing is both of you actually talk of, Jack, you talked of the Surghat and Surdas, also a Bhakti poet, and also of having visited the Yamunotri. And I remember initially when I started working with water, being a non-practicing Hindu, I did my journey to Gangotri on the way, Yamunotri, and also brought back, the water can that you do with holy water from the river, from the Kamandal, or it's usually at the time, and it still is, white plastic bottles that you also saw in Alia's work that is there. So you bring that back, and I still have it. But on the way, this was 96, 97, before I even did any of the works on water that I did. And on the way, you stop at Rishikesh, you stop at Haridwar, and you stop at Raman. And then you look at your fellow people who are believers, and you bathe in the same river. They soak their suds, and you drink, and you also drink the same water. But when you go to a restaurant on the riverbank, you order bottled water. At the time, there was Bisleri. Most of the time, 85. So that is what got me working. So that is that's exactly the point that I want to come to, is the connection with bhakti. Is that one is, how do we conceptualize this dichotomy of leaving our filth within the river and then ordering our bottled water at the restaurant? And then is bhakti the main reason for the deterioration? Because bhakti leads you to believe that whatever will happen will happen. You just sing the praises of the god or the goddess. So isn't that the main reason from the degradation of religious sites, religious towns? And I can say this, some of our Hindu religious towns are perhaps the dirtiest in the world, if I may say. Right. So isn't bhakti the main reason for overlooking all of this dirt, that the goddess or the god will come and clean it up, and that Kalyug that we talk of is a repair that will happen? So it makes us not actually do anything about our condition. I don't know. Your thoughts, please. Bas.
जवाब देना पड़ेगा.
Jawab. Yes. You have to talk through bhakti now.
Yeah.
All right. Can I do that?
Yes, please,
All right.
please. Go ahead.
So bhakti is a major word in the vocabulary of Hindu religion, but it's not the only word that has to do with religious behavior. Particularly, I was very interested in your lifting up for us the Mahabharata specifically, and the sort of matter of myth and story. I firmly believe, actually, that it's a mistake for us when we academics teach Indian religion to focus specifically on temple religion and what people say they believe or feel, bhakti, and to leave aside the world of what you call mythology, the world of Mahabharata and story. Because I think that those two actually form a single fabric. And it's true, of course, that the Mahabharata also leads to a terrible end. It's fascinating that Yudhishthira is the person who receives the question of the river. Who is Yudhishthira? He's the son of Dharma, of that. That's your other main word for religion. Well, he is represented, he is taken by the river to be the representative of Dharma. So he's the one who gets the question. But she's the one, in some ways, who knows the answer more than he ever can. And we see his failings as a professor, let us say, of Dharma in what happens in the Mahabharata. So in that way, I would say bhakti and the world of story move together in a sort of uncomfortable way. I don't know the answer. I would just say that I hear less about the Kali Yuga and Pralaya, about the inevitable decline of the world, than you might think I would. You're the non-Hindu in the group, so I can ask you. Tulsi claimed to be one, so we'll turn to her in a moment. I don't know. But my feeling would be that, as an American, that we're faced with the consequences of our own detritus, more in India than we are in the United States yet. We have more land. Who's the we? I mean, who was suppressed in order to make it possible for me to stand here? In India, no. It's an ancient civilization, deeply and heavily populated. So we're seeing the results of the human species there. I would say that people I know are trying to wake up, but they're more overwhelmed with the task than we are because it's a more difficult task there. To me, that sense of being overwhelmed is understandable. Bottled water, and then I should shut up. My dear friend Srivatsa Goswami and my mentor in India is a major Brahmin Vaishnava intellectual and priest and actually a Bhagavad Katha Deniwala. So he's a Karniwala Kana Cheta. He speaks publicly about it. When his father died back in 2017, it became his responsibility as the first child to be the primary officiant at the cremation of his father. And to do that, he had to purify himself according to the regulations before he could be a ritual body appropriate to the task. The shaving of the hair is required and bathing in the Yamuna. What did he bathe in? A large bottle, a plastic bottle of what you call bisaladi, I would call it potent spring water, was carried to him. He poured a tiny bit of Yamuna water in it, and it became the Yamuna. But it wasn't really the Yamuna. It was someone else's water. So even this person, as he enacted the death of his father, was reliant upon the workarounds that we as a culture have produced. It's a sad fact.
Yeah. Did you want to actually address a similar question to Tulsi?
No, I mean, probably the same question for Tulsi. I mean, just to comment on Bangalore being the seat of the software, one of the few of the larger companies of software engineers in the world, and the connection with Silicon Valley in the US, and the temples that are around, and and as far as I used to hear was Bangalore, there would be a shower every other alternate day, and now that is not there anymore, and the way urban planning comes in, and also, can you also talk about the Hanuman temple a little bit more and its significance with the monsoon? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Atul, and that was a fascinating answer, Jack, or fascinating conversation about bhakti. I'll start with the Hanuman temple because it's a very old temple, and in the Bangalore region, which is part of the Deccan Plateau, the subcontinent, it's scattered with these small sort of temples to various forms of nature. But this temple is special in that Hanuman is the son of the wind god Vayu, and the temple is situated at exactly the point where the monsoon winds, that the heated Saudi Arabian peninsula, as the heat lifts off, the dome of heat lifts off, that it heats the Arabian Sea. And off the Arabian Sea come clouds, monsoonal clouds, that funnel through an ancient tectonic gap in the hills called the Palagat Gap. And it streaks towards the Deccan Plateau. And the Hanuman temple is at exactly the point where these clouds first enter into the city of Bangalore. And it seems a coincidence, but I don't believe it's an accident, that the wind god Vayu's son stands protecting the city from these enormous clouds, these rain clouds, these typhoonic clouds. And I think that this connection between climate, geology, and bhakti is a very old strand. Hinduism is, of course, a very old religion. And it's overlaid uncomfortably with the recent focus on software and development. Bangalore is the center of an Indian techno-scientific aspirational imagination, which to an anthropologist like myself raises fascinating questions of what exactly is development. Bangalore was known as this beautiful, clean and green city, for all of us who have been there, and has slowly become less and less livable over the past decade and a half that I've been studying it. I think it's important to talk about Bangalore particularly because of its apex of development. And it's important also as a southern voice, because most of the stuff on climate change in India and its dirt has come from a northern Indian perspective. And so I represent, uncomfortably, the south. And I think bhakti is perceived differently. I would say that the people who are cleaning up the lakes, Kempama, has as much bhakti, just of a different sort, perhaps, than the way we teach bhakti, as in Mirabai, Kabir, Surdas, and is a bhakti of the 21st century where our population tilts at, we're the most populous nation on earth. I think that the discourse and the realities don't match anymore. That is the problem that we really face. Besides the fact that we have taken to plastic like no other nation on earth. Where previously we used to use leaf-based bowls, we now use plastic bowls. And as Gina said, the half-life of these things is enormous. But I'll end with that.
Oh, thank you, Tulasi. So to my question about, just comments about the monsoon this year and the Yamuna, because the river Yamuna breached the danger mark of 2005
yes.
meters 3 times. I think it has happened only this time that within a single monsoon it breached the danger mark thrice, with huge cloud bursts in the Himalayas, which kind of affected it. And the changing course of monsoon, and if one goes by what Amitav Ghosh says, that there will be more cyclonic storms within the Arabian Sea than the Bay of Bengal, and the recent cyclone Biparjoy, which hit Gujarat coast and moved into Gujarat and Rajasthan, which are arid areas. And I was there for my project 28th North Parallel in Bikaner, and the cyclonic storm actually came into Bikaner. And running even 2022, 21st of June, which was supposed to be the most arid and hottest time of the year, it rained in Bikaner, in the desert. And 2022, this year as well, 21st of June, this year as well, it rained again because of the cyclone. So Gujarat and Rajasthan, which are arid areas, have got the maximum amount of rain, at least 200% more than they usually do, and they have been inundated with flash floods. And how things have changed is that UP, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, which are the usual Gangetic plain where most of the crops, rice and wheat are, they have gone into a rain deficit area. So if these changes are going to take place, see, my question to myself and question to others is that if all these questions are taking place and we as a country continuously feel overwhelmed and unable to deal with it, so how are we going to kind of engage with what is very immediate? And for me, it is not enough to be overwhelmed. It's actually to be kind of to continuous to act. Bhakti, I want to just come back. I'm just coming back again for a comment. Right? Somewhere I feel that bhakti leads to a non-action, right? Leaving it into not working with it, but letting it be. Let the pralay come in. Sorry, I just wanted to come. Other questions.
Tulsi had a...
No, I had a small response. I think what is fascinating about climatological grief, a climate of grief, is that we tend to sink into this discourse of Kali Yuga or Pralaya, what do we do? And I think the grief is so overwhelming, as Jack said, that we really don't have a path out and we resort to discourses. But really, the path out is not the magic bullet. It is the everyday repair of the world. I think that is the bhakti. The action, Kempama's bhakti is, her devotion to the waters is the kind of small-scale repair we need. Now you may say, well, that's one person. But then there's this guy that the New York Times wrote about, Anand Malivada, who has repaired 3 or 4 lakes and intends to repair all 1,000 in his lifetime. He's a software engineer who gave up softwaring for whatever the verb form of that is, to repair lakes. So you do get bhakti as a conscience, as a dharma, to Prithvi, to the earth, as a living, breathing being. I think Western secularized Hindus, like you and me, tend to see the religion as enacted in a particular way, and that is the discourse that has always existed also, post-colonial discourse. But I think the bhakti is changing, and for the better. At least we're retrieving indigenous discourses of bhakti. Because when she says Notkoltini, she's talking about a bhakti and a dharma. It may not be the dharma of the Mahabharata, but I think far more important.
Can I say one more
Yeah,
thing?
please.
So what is bhakti? It depends where you stand. I want to admit, first of all, that in this country also, our bhakti also can be used to help us prevent seeing the damage that we are causing. I mean, there's a lot of big oil, let me just say, in Texas, and there's also a lot of evangelical Christian religion. I just made some enemies. But, there it is. There are different kinds of bhakti. You mentioned some bhakti saints, but you didn't happen to mention Ravidas. I'm also thinking of Basavana and Namdev and so forth.
Yes.
There's a particular kind of bhakti there that has to do with people whose life experience is to be regarded as dirty by others. Those people have something very special to say.
Like Kempama.
Like Kempama. And I'm thinking of a particular poem which was shared actually between the people that I mentioned from century to century without their knowing that others had voiced this poem. But it's the same poem. And it begins by saying that water the fish have muddied. They pooped in it. Milk, the calf, took the first sip, rendering it thereby jhuta, or rather secondhand for all the rest of us, and so forth. And that's what my life is like, they said. I'm one of the rejected people. I'm regarded as being that. So their way into, then what do they say about being devoted? Well, they have different things to say, but they start with that realization that I am polluted. We are polluted, and we're polluted by the collective pollution that we have made. That, I would say, is the beginning of bhakti. And on the hope end, our bhakti, the bhakti of our time, the bhakti that my students share, actually, they are remarkable. They're going into climate law. They're wondering, where is my bhakti in relation to where I stand in the world? And it's very important for Americans to take a lead on this, because we are the great polluters of fossil fuels. We just know it. Yeah. But Indians are facing it first. Yeah. If there's an image to hope for, I would say it is the image of the Yamuna and the Ganga, in that, what did they do? They absorb all of this junk. By the way, population control comes in too. All this stuff as they flow out. And then what happens? They become the sagar, the kalapani, that's the other name. Wow. There's not much discussion about sagar really in Hindu law. There should be more. And then what? There's evaporation, and they go back up to the heavens. And tonight's a beautiful night. Go outside. You live in Cambridge. You can see it. See the Ganges in the sky. Yes. See the Akash Ganga, the heavenly Ganga, which flows above us in the form of the Milky Way. Right. If we could accustom ourselves to being a part of that cycle, that reality, and realize that we're in a time of unpredictability, a monsoon time actually, that would count, it seems to me, as a framework of collective bhakti that might help to get us through. Some of the actions will be small. In all of our cases, they have to be small. But at least this might provide a vision for where we stand, our bhakti, that would make it possible.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I think the hope lies in our students, whether in India or in the United States, anywhere in the world, because it's clear that the mess we have made, they have vowed to clean it up. It's very clear from there, and their bhakti, I think, is truly important for us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, and I think we should take some audience questions, but I am so reminded of, because you have mentioned Amitav Ghosh's Great Derangement, 2016 book several times, and actually this book was in the back of my mind the whole time I'm preparing for this exhibition and creating this exhibition. And I went back to that book many times, and I actually found it very surprising that third time reading that I realized actually he's ending that book, hanging the hope of coming out of this on the religious groups for achieving climate justice. So I have a quote from him here. It is impossible to see any way out of this crisis without an acceptance of limits and limitations. And this is, in turn, I think, intimately related to the idea of the sacred. So we've been calling it religion, mythology, and what have you. If religious groupings around the world can join hands with popular movements, they may well be able to provide the momentum that is needed for the world to move forward on drastically reducing emissions without sacrificing considerations of equity, end quote. So I'm kind of constantly reminded of this. Well, you're talking about bhakti and religion and what have you. So I'm going to turn to some of the audience questions, if that's okay. Yeah? All right. I mean, let's see. There's a question for Tulasi in your conclusion, and I'm glad we're actually, we already in this discussion kind of came to a little bit of hopeful rather than despair. So there is a hope within Indigenous craft, how it connects with repair. Can you sort of comment more on this sort of connection between Indigenous craft and repair?
Yes, I think that's where part of the book is headed, to think about Indigenous craft. What Atul in his presentation was talked about the god of craft and repair, Vishwakarma. And in the myth, Vishwakarma chisels off some of the sun's rays because the sun becomes too powerful. So this ability to do small-scale sort of adjustments that then have enormous consequences. And I think repair is really key. A small biographical detail. Over the course of my lifetime, I've been stunned as to how much I've thrown away. And it has it's reached a tipping point in the past 15 years. In India, we always used to reuse stuff, plastic bottles, ropes, bits of thread, etc. They would always be in the house and you would reuse them. But as I came to this country, I've become aware of how much more I just throw away. And I think this culture of obsolescence, which technology, there's a reason why Bangalore is a software capital. It's all about absorbing a culture of obsolescence where, okay, so the Apple iPhone 9 is not good enough, you have to have the 15 and whatever. And so in India, I noticed there are no more people who repair irons. There are no more people who repair bricks and stone walls. You can't get tailors anymore. You can't get plumbers easily. In this country, you just pay more for them and more and more and more. So repair is something we are failing at in our search for the new. And I think Kempama brings us back to repair as a fundamental, and reparations, therefore, as a fundamental act, corrective act of our obsolescence of morality, our ethics, our changing ethics. I can say more about repair, but I'll stop there because I think that, again, it's a very small intervention, but I think it has huge consequences. And I want to think about it as a religious, ethical act that she brings forward to us. She frames it as God's grace, but it is something that is central to who we are as human beings and changing our small behaviors in that way.
May I stick in some Sanskrit?
Yes.
Somebody who knows no Sanskrit at all?
Please.
But my daughter does. The last line, actually, of the Yamanashtakam of Vallabhacharya, the Palishruti line, which tells what of these verses of praise, what good they do, the fruits of the whole thing, of singing this. In the last line of that, this theologian or poet, who actually lived in Arel at the confluence of the Yamuna and the Ganga.
Ganga.
He says to Yamuna Devi, he says, Swabhava Vijayo Bhavet. Allow it to be the case that I somehow have victory over Swabhava, my nature. So that's the last line. He prays to her, not that she sort of, just take care of it all. He prays to her that she will somehow teach him the need to have reparative victory over himself. And I sort of like the fact that repair and riparian are a bit close in English. It's a beautiful thing to see the kind of agriculture that takes place on the banks. You point this out effectively in your Yamuna book. Just to see what happens in a monsoon climate when the river is allowed to flow. Suddenly, as the monsoon dissipates, you have cultivable land that used to be beneath the river. It's the most beautiful thing to see people moving in and growing these wonderful crops which can just flourish in that kind of environment. So that's the hope. But how can we turn our world into that kind of riparian environment? That's what takes a lot of work.
Yeah, indeed. And I think there are a couple of questions in that line, actually, thinking about, what can one do actually on the face of, like, is there any salvation for Indian rivers? What is the course of activities? Or, what is, where do you find hope in the face of such overwhelming degradation? And I think,
Can I say something?
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
Vrindavan, it happens that the BJP and the Modi government are planning to build a corridor in Vrindavan, a la Banaras, a la other places, Ujjain. What does that mean? That means a green corridor. It's supposed to be that will connect the Bihariji temple, the most visited temple in town, with the river. What does the river mean? It doesn't mean where the river used to flow. It means the river on the other side of the landfill produced by Vikas, by development, and so forth. Anyway, it's going to make it look okay from the top. I would love it if Vrindavan citizens would be able somehow to mount a campaign that said, all right, we'll build this. Many people will have to be displaced. Maybe it will have some good properties, as the Manaras one I think also does. But there has to be a deal here. We need to have also, at the same time, a policy that the land that actually remains untouched, which is on the other side of the Yamuna, that become protected land as a symbol to us of what we have lost. And the other thing, obviously, that needs to take place is a sewage system for Vrindavan. And it's not going to be easy. It means a pump system that will actually pump sewage water back up to a height where the town is at its highest point, and make it possible to funnel that into sewage treatment plants, which we need more of. So those are, at least in that setting, a concrete plan that could be mounted. But as an outsider, I'm not much of a person to do it, but if the town could come together behind this, and it's not going to be easy, that would be something really good. The underside, but ultimately the overside of the creation of such a corridor.
Well, I'm afraid that our time is up, but I'm glad that there is a sort of concrete suggestions for action here. And I'm thinking we heard a lot of sort of heart-aching situations, and also, but some hopes for repair. And with that, I hope, thank you for joining us, and also please don't forget to share your water story. And for those of you who are here, please visit the gallery and see the exhibition if you haven't had a chance to do so. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.